So now that we've talked about seeing ideas, the question is, where do our ideas come from? And so this leads us to the second part of the groove, which is creativity. One thing to keep in mind, you are all artists and you're all engineers. I don't want to hear that, no, I can't do that, I'm not an engineer. Or, that's artsy-fartsy stuff, how am I supposed to know how to do that? You're both, and this is why. If you look at that child, what is he doing? He's drawing. All of you, at one time or another, your parents put a writing utensil in your hand, and it was your natural instinct to draw. We all have an artistic side to us. We also have an intelligent side to us. You all can be engineers. The Poly School, before the semester starts, they all get the professors together. And you get a box of stuff. And what they wanted to do is, there's a golf ball, and they asked you, put something together that shows the journey of our students through Poly. And what happens is, we were with engineering professors, and I just sat back. I didn't want any piece of it. And then these engineering professors were all trying to do different things, and they tried to take like a wind-up toy to drag the golf ball around. And I'm there like, you do realize the spring force on that thing isn't much more than the weight of the toy itself, don't you? Anyway, after a while they got frustrated and they just left. And we were given an hour and a half, and now there went 45 minutes. And I said to the other professors, do you want to really know how to do this thing? And everybody said yes. Well, the first thing I said is, in order to move that ball, you need energy. We have no energy sources. He said, there's only one source we have, potential energy, gravity. And what we did next is we planned out, okay, what are 4 things that we can put together with all this stuff? And with these other professors, I said, okay, you have this quarter, you have this quarter, you have this quarter. Let's get our parts to work, and then we'll put it all together. Well, who were these professors? Well, one was a graphic artist, and the other was human factors. They weren't engineers, and guess what? They did a spectacular job because they can problem solve and see things. You have an intelligent side. If you can logically reason, you can be an engineer. Remember, all of you have this within you. So, how do we apply this information that we've got? We need to expand our thinking. There are barriers that prevent us from realizing ideas. And so, what we need to do is break through. Now, Professor Kennedy in TEM200 and later on in 431, he'll go through basically some of the business aspects. This is my view. Basically, conceptually, I always try to go for simplicity. He'll go into more detail. I'm just talking about what is the concept of creativity. Mindfulness is being aware of the situation that you're in. Being mindful of what's going on around you. So in order to break through, you need to expand the boundaries, maximize, which are tactics, and what is the creative journey that we go on. We talked about how we think, that there's conscious processing where we think through things, and there's automated processing, and those are the ideas that come into your head. But what is creativity? This is all creativity is. If you look at every basic creation in mankind, somebody took one thing and another thing and brought them together. That's it. That's what creativity is. So you need to count through your universe, look through your ideas. And so these are the topics we're going to talk about today. Do you have the right processor to look through it and look at the variables and pick the open space? So this is your basically universe of ideas. There's you. And there's a boundary. And within that boundary are your ideas. Now, what creates this boundary? It could be your education, it could be your biases, it could be your training. And here's the biggest thing, and this is why I tend to data dump my students. The biggest limitation you have is knowledge. Once you have knowledge, then you can figure it all out. How many times did you hear something new and went, oh, I never thought about it that way? And so the question is how do you get that knowledge, and how does that affect creativity? There's also another barrier. In the outer barrier, this is where you start getting to the organic stuff like your upbringing, your emotions, your environment. Here's the thing, to bring that barrier down, now we're talking about getting you on a couch, and this could take years of therapy. And so I don't have that much time. So I'm not going to talk about psychological limits, but basically your knowledge limits. And so what happens is if I can bring down that inner barrier through knowledge, all of a sudden your space of ideas becomes much bigger. However, bringing down the outside one, that's kind of organic in nature, and that's much more difficult. What innovation is about connecting ideas. I have one idea and another idea. Creativity is basically the process of bringing those together. So if every idea has a scope to it, meaning because I know this, how many other ideas can I get? Well, there's just so many ideas I can come up with it. And so it's a radius. And where that radius comes from is our imagination. Some people are just more imaginative to others. And that's definitely true with me. I mean, some people, like, you give them a fact and they come up with something else, and they're like, what? And so if you take two ideas with different scopes and those scopes overlap, that's why they connect. That is what you're trying to do. How do I introduce innovative power? Well, one is the big idea. I have an idea and I can make it grow. And so that radius gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And why does it grow? It's about my imagination. What can I imagine? And so how do I increase my imagination? This is why you came to school. The one thing I've never regretted was going to MIT. Just the class of people I met there. It was just extraordinary. And the biggest thing is you have discussions with these people. And so you play with ideas. You have discussions. And this is what education is about. And so you learn how to dream. In dreaming, ideas get bigger and bigger and bigger. Second idea is you may not be the kind of person who's really big on that, but there's another approach, and that's breeding. One idea creates another idea, which creates another idea, which creates another idea, and another. And so what happens is that ideas breed ideas. Again, you don't do it alone. You do it through others. This is why in this class I'm making you do these discussion groups. Honestly, I don't know if it's going to work or not. It could just fall flat on its face, or it could be truly successful. We'll see. And so, if you can, what happens typically is that one idea inspires you to come up with other ideas. The implication of all this is that if I have a big imagination, it means that I don't need to know a lot of ideas. They could be far apart because every idea has got a big radius to it. Or if I have a small imagination, then I need more ideas since they're close together. I need more exposure. And so my source of imagination, it could be organic, or it could just be, I never imagined this because I just didn't have the knowledge. This is part of the reason why all great entrepreneurs are good readers. And it's because they realize they need a constant source of new ideas. Bill Gates, I don't know, he reads something like 20 books a year, or actually more than that. But when you look at all great entrepreneurs, they're all great readers. And the implication of all this is your mindsets. Conceptual thinking is about how ideas connect. Storytelling pulls all the ideas together. In developing the mindset of writers, architects, and economists, you have a greater understanding of what those ideas mean. And so if you can master these three skills, then you can come up with great ideas. So here's an idea of matching. Okay, so Henry Ford saw the car, and Henry Ford's big dream was, gee, I want to make an affordable car for everybody. And so what did he come up with? He understood how to make a car, and then one day he saw a slaughterhouse, and he saw the pigs coming off the line one after another. And he thought, hey, I could do exactly the same thing to make cars. And that's what he came up with the Ford Motor Company. The Sony Walkman, Steve Jobs greatly admired it. He greatly admired what Sony did. He thought this was one of the greatest products ever that he'd ever seen, the miniaturized and portable electronics. And he was inspired by it. And what did he think? What's the future beyond the cassette and everything else? It's going to be digital music. And subsequently, that started the iPod, which then became the iPhone, and started Apple towards where it is today. Another example is Amazon. Well, they did things at the web, and basically Bezos looked at stores and realized, you know something? It's all about dollars per square feet. That's the nature of retail. And he realized that he could greatly cut down on that. And so he came up with Amazon. What did Amazon do next? He looked at what are the future products, and he realized that he was selling, physical products, planet Earth. But he also realized there was another world, the digital world. And so Amazon put that together, and what did they come up with? Amazon Web Services. Now, a second technique of coming up with ideas is if you have a small imagination, what you do is actually filter through a lot of different ideas until you finally find the right one. The thing about Einstein, and actually most Nobel Prize winners, nobody talks about the 400 ideas that Einstein came up with that didn't work. But guess what? You only have to find one. My lab partner at MIT, I used to refer to myself as the village idiot next to him. But he used to be able to cycle through ideas. I always joked that he was running at megahertz while I was running at kilohertz. But we made a good pairing because basically I would catch his mistakes because he'd be moving so fast. Anyway, this is another way, and this is the way small imagination works. Sort through a lot of ideas until you find the one that works. And here's an example of using the radius of your ideas. What is the process of driving a car? You get in the car, you drive, and then you park. And so the possibility is for you, what's the first thing they did? They came up with the automated seatbelt, which they've taken out because people didn't like it. Driving, autopilot. I actually don't believe they'll ever get it right. A lot of Tesla users say, oh no, autopilot works great. But if I have to sit behind the wheel, then it's not really an autopilot. And the reason why is in driving, there's just too many corner cases. And corner cases are basically those obscure events that happen, but it's possible they will happen. And there's so many corner cases in driving, and those accidents basically could end up in fatalities, and that's why I don't think it'll work. My big dream is they come up with the auto park. And wouldn't it be great if, you could pull up to a curve and tell your car, go park. And then it goes up and down the aisles without you. And then when I come out of somewhere, I could say, come get me. And then all of a sudden, my car will just pull out of the parking space and come get me. And that's why when they say there's an auto park, it isn't really. Until they can have that, then it's a true auto park. Focusing. When you have ideas, you can go bigger or go smaller. The thing about Henry Ford is that when he came up with the assembly line, the way the car business worked is you had people like Carl Benz and Ransom Olds that made $100,000 cars, very expensive cars. And then Ford managed to come up with the assembly line idea. Not only that, but he realized that people need to earn a living wage. This is why I consider Henry Ford to be much greater than Elon Musk. And the reason why is because If Tesla never existed, would your life have changed? Not really. There'd still be cars. They find a way to reduce pollution. But on the other hand, Henry Ford changed the very way we lived. On the other hand, here's where you can find ideas. Either go bigger or go smaller. Look at what you're interested in. Look at the chain of events that happens. Think about what is the next link in the chain. You join what they do right now, and that next link in the chain, that's what Jobs did. And then you can come up with a great innovation. And how did Henry Ford get beat by? Alfred P. Sloan. Alfred P. Sloan, the MIT Business School is named after him, Sloan School of Management. And Alfred P. Sloan actually created what today is the modern car company. He was the one who realized, hey, there are different kinds of cars in different price classes, and that's what he created. Henry Ford said you can have anything, any Ford that you want as long as it's black. He's the one who introduced color. But here's the biggest thing of all. Henry Ford believed that debt was a moral failing. Alfred P. Sloan, he created financing because he realized that a $500 car on a $1,500 wage, yes, you could afford it, but that's a huge chunk of change to ask people to come up with. And they're going to have to save that money for a long time. And so what did Alfred P. Sloan do? He came up with lending because he said people can't afford $500 in one chunk. They could probably afford $25. And so I'm going to keep them in debt for a while and make interest on it. Now, you either go bigger or you go smaller. The windshield wiper was created by a woman in the 1920s, Mary Anderson. My guess is she got behind a wheel of a car, maybe riding along, and then all of a sudden it started raining or something, and she thought, man, you can't see crap out of this thing. And wouldn't it be great if there's a way to wipe this away? And if it was intermittent? A woman in that age, to me, it's just extraordinary that she came up with the windshield wiper. Instead of going bigger, she went smaller. In the daily operations, how can I make something bigger? So now that we've talked about all ideas that come from our knowledge and imagination, how do we start up education? Learn from each other. This is one of the biggest reasons why you're here at ASU. Making an effort to populate your universe. How often do you read things? I read business magazines and journals. The thing is, I don't have time to read through the whole thing, so what do? You got a bathroom, right? You'd be amazed how many ideas you come up with just reading an article or learning something new. Populate your universe, but this is why you go to school. Take advantage of it. You only get these opportunities so much. Read. Ideas can grow. It can breed. They're simple and clean. If it's a story, you can understand the ideas, and through problem solving, you can reshape them. Everything in your life could be an opportunity to learn. Every little thing you learned. When Dr. Cho was younger, he did Taekwondo. And one time we were always taught for a certain kick that we should slide your foot behind it, back step. And then what happened? I was watching a musical, a chorus line, and I noticed if they cross-step that they could cover a lot more room. And all of a sudden, in a sparring match, this guy said, "What did you do?" Ideas come from the craziest places. My dad solved the problem of friction, of static electricity on plastic. And I'm like, how did you come up with that? And he said, I thought about when I did your diapers. When I did your diapers, it would get stiff, and then I would move it. And I thought, we're going about this wrong. Instead of going towards micro, we should go towards macro particles, large particles. Less contact, less static electricity. And it's like, wow, my dad came up with this idea based on me taking a dump. Anyway, expand your thinking. Read, listen to podcasts, watch videos, have a coffee just to talk with people. Entrepreneurs are good readers for a reason. Take notes. A lot of you, I notice, carry around notebooks. This is your conceptual map and storage. Look at the problem through others' eyes. Now this is one of my most impressive accomplishments. So I'll pause for you to absorb it and to comprehend it. But when I was in high school, I was captain of my chess team. Okay, that's enough. But one thing you do when you're a competitive chess player is when you get stuck, you get up from the board and you walk around to the other side and you stand behind the other player, not to intimidate him, but I want to see what he's seeing. And so learn to look at through other people's eyes. Understand what the nature of what you're dealing with, and we'll get more into that. And also, in terms of the environment, what position are you in? And so, the thing is, the position in your environment pretty much tells the perspective of what you're looking at. Let's face it, in battle, it's a very much different view coming up the hill versus looking down the hill. This is why I tell you to think like economists, think like writers, and think like architects. This enables you to take different perspectives of looking at things and through someone else's eyes. The nature of things is what is the core that you're dealing with. Do you put yourself in the best position to think? Learn, where do I come up with my best ideas? To me, most of my patent ideas happen in quasi-sleep. You know that little part when you're just nodding off between consciousness and sleep? All of a sudden, that's where I come up with my ideas. Or I tended to come up with a lot of ideas in the shower. What it came down to is, if I can find a place to unclutter my mind, that's where I came up with ideas. So talking to others is such an important thing. And yet, a lot of people don't know how to conduct meetings and how to have a fruitful discussion with people. And so this is a journey that you go on. First of all, recognize that to think unconventionally, you have to be a bit of a kook. The world is going to see you as being kind of crazy. So embrace it. The next step after embracing yourself is you need time for yourself to think. Filter out the clutter. Find out what's the best place. For example, what I did in a startup is, where do you have meetings? Conference rooms. Well, after a while, we started getting stale in our thinking. Then one day, we lucked out on this. All the conference rooms were filled. And they said, where are we going to go? And then somebody said, hey, there's a Baskin-Robbins a couple of blocks from here. And so we all went to Baskin-Robbins. I bought everybody ice cream. And then everybody relaxed. And all of a sudden, we came up with some of the best ideas in those meetings. You can't know it all. Remember diversity? This is why you need others. Others can help you come up with the different ideas. There's just too many dimensions to problems. That's why you need more eyes. The next space is, don't put so much pressure on yourself. That's the thing. You can go into meetings and you can feel the tension of what everybody's trying to do. Be chill. Allow people to feel comfortable to express themselves and consider everything. One great story is, and this was during consulting for a hospital, what ended up happening is that they're trying to cut costs in the hospital, and they asked everybody, does anybody have any ideas? And then this one woman, and she was like a laundry person or something like that, and she had worked there for 40 years, and she just, small little person, she raises her hand, and then she just says, can you do something about the water? He says, it's too hot in there. And then everybody just dismissed it. Oh, she's a cranky woman. And then all of a sudden it was like, whoa, wait a minute. Let's listen to her. And what they did is they checked the water heaters. They were cranked up too high. She was absolutely right. Do you know how much hot water a hospital uses? I mean, we're talking about tons and tons of gallons. That woman's little comment, save that hospital tens of thousands of dollars per month. Consider every idea, even if it's stupid. And then if it is stupid, dismiss it. But at least listen. And that's one thing I've learned how to do as a leader. Really listen to people. The thing about a group is one person's opinion can't mean more than somebody else's. And this is part of the reason why with my students and everything else, I'm an industry guy. I'm not an academician. I don't believe in this control, you're here and the teacher's here type of thing. And so what I've always done is been very laid back because I want people to feel like we're all equals. And so people typically didn't think of me as being the boss because I never acted that way. I acted as one of them instead of being above them. But of course, though, if you are the boss, then you have to act like a boss at times. They have to know that, yeah, he's in charge. Actually, once it was really funny. I came in and my engineering group was gone. It was about 6 guys. And they had taken off for a conference and no one bothered telling me. And so I called him up on his cell phone. I said, Paul, where is everybody? We're on our way to Semicon. Did you ask for permission first? And then all of a sudden I hear him say to the back of the room, back of the van they were in, hey, did anybody bother telling Steve that we're going to go attend Semicon? I thought you were. And then they said, no, we didn't. And I said to them, this level of insubordination and lack of respect for me can't be tolerated. You're all fired. And then what happened is Paul turns around and tells the group, Steve says we're all fired. And what did I hear next? They were all cheering. And then I said, wait. You guys haven't paid enough penance. You're not fired. You have to come to work. And then he turned around and he said, we're not fired. And they all started going, oh man, oh. But anyway, then after the joking, and this is where humor can be very effective, I said, look guys, he said, if it was really serious today, I would have called you back and you would have had to turn that van around. But in the future, don't do this again. And so they understood that. But someone can't be above someone else if you want to have a really effective discussion. Also, try to keep it within 5 people. You can't, and this is part of the reason why your teams are not above 5 people. And that's the optimal number for a discussion. Later on, you can include more people. But if you want to move quickly and have agility, try to keep the numbers low. Humor always works. Laughing matters. That's my grandson. An example of that is I had this employee, Melissa, and they always sent Melissa in to tell me the bad news. And I said, why do they always send you in? And they said, well, there's this perception that I'm your favorite, so they figure they won't get into trouble. So that's why they sent me in. And I said, wow, you're my little brother. And she said, what does that mean? And I said, we used to do the same thing with our parents if we wanted something, because my brother was 7 years younger than me, and he was the baby of the family. And so we used to send him in to talk to my parents if we really wanted something. But every time Melissa would come in, she would tell me bad news. And I said, my response to you is just the same every time. He said, I think what we should do is start having hand puppets. And I said, we can make little hand puppets, and the ones that you pull a string, and what the hand puppet will say is, so what you're telling me is, we're screwed. And what ended up happening is, as a joke, we would go to meetings, and then somebody would say something bad, and then we all start sitting there going like this to each other. But laughter matters. Humor matters. Make it a part of what it is. And finally, it can't be all about the money. If it's all about the money, then your people are just mercenaries. And if they're mercenaries, they're not going to come up with the best ideas. Also, Socratic thinking. Here's the hardest thing, is that there's a tendency to pass judgment on people. One way to get around that is what Socrates used to do. He wouldn't make statements to his students. He would ask questions. By asking questions, it means you are listening to them. And it's not insulting to ask a question unless you word it in an insulting way. Try sometime to go through the discussion and only use questions. The funny thing is, the people who reported me called this Jedi mind tricks. Yeah, one time I didn't know it, but they all got together and said, "We are not falling for Steve's Jedi mind tricks this time." He said, "We're going to do what we want to do." And so they came in and I started asking questions. And then I would go on the board and mark, the important aspects. And then we went through it all. I said, "Okay, go to it." And then after the meeting, they suddenly realized, "Wait a minute, we're doing what he wants again. We fell for it." But the thing is, they weren't doing what I wanted. They were doing what they wanted because they answered the questions. And so this is one way of performing leadership. Get them to own it. The thing is, there are all kinds of gadgets, lots of tools. Pick the ones that work for you, but don't make it about the gadget. Make it about the discussion. Here's the thing. Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer, he wrote I, Robot, as well as a number of great books. He came up with these concepts 50 years ago, and they still work. Good concepts are timeless. But, of course, you have loopholes. And so that brings us to the end of our discussion about creativity. And now that we're creative, we can see things conceptually. Now we'll go on and talk about problem solving.